I want to talk about true growth. True growth versus perceived growth. A lot of us might learn something new and we think we're growing. And we are in a sense, you know. But if we're not integrating that stuff, and I talk about this a lot, if we're not integrating that stuff, then there's not any true growth. There's only perceived growth. We're only adding to who we already think we are. We're adding, you know. We might have watched somebody else online. You're like, oh my God, I really like the way that guy talks about that shit. I really like the way that woman thinks about that stuff. I'm gonna start to do that too. And then we take that stuff on, you know, and we feel we're growing, and we are, but not in a true way. It's more perceived growth. We see ourselves as growing. We see ourselves as expanding, but until we actually integrate that stuff and integrate the meaning that's underneath of it and the meaning that's behind it, and even take one step backwards before that and look and have accurate self-assessment and look at the reason why we're choosing to add those things into our life, why we're choosing to walk in a different way. And if we're choosing to walk in a different way just to problem solve a situation that we might feel we're in, you know, maybe we're feeling uncomfortable with something, you know, maybe we're trying to problem solve a partner, somebody else, maybe we're trying to problem solve like problems at work or something like that. Like maybe we're just in a problem solving zone, and so, you know, we're looking for some kind of a silver bullet to help us in the situation we're in. And so we might learn something new. And we might take that thing on and we might add it. We might add it. And then once we've added it into our knowledge bank, we're like, yeah, I've grown, you know. And then we can talk about it with other people, you know, maybe we can articulate it really well. But we haven't truly integrated it into our lives. And so the situation that triggered that learning, triggered that desire to learn something new, just manifests itself again in a different way in front of us, right? That's a clue to us that we only have perceived, we're only perceiving that we're growing. We only have perceived growth. We don't have true growth. You know, once we have true growth, then those patterns don't keep repeating themselves. We won't have a similar situation show up in front of us over and over and over again, right? You know, we're not just collecting nuggets of stuff up here in order to talk about things in a different way or articulate ourselves in a better way, or, you know, or argue with our partner in a better way, right? Or justify the places that we're stuck, justify the places that we're holding ourselves back, justify the places that we're in self-preservation mode and defensive mode. Sometimes we may learn those things to actually cement ourselves even deeper, entrench ourselves even deeper into our weaknesses, into our, you know, dysfunctions, into those things that are actually standing in the way, you know. I used to frame this to an old friend of mine as sometimes our traumas drive the bus, right? And we don't even know they're driving the bus, and they're so sneaky and they're so wily that it feels really logical to us. It feels really normal to us, but from outside we're actually, you know, throwing matches behind us, lit matches behind us as we walk, and we don't even know, right? Like our traumas could be driving the bus and we don't even know. Anyways, our traumas tend to look for silver bullets, tend to look for things that we can use to problem solve, and they're usually not real solutions. They're usually not true growth. They're usually perceived growth, right? Because generally our traumas are invested in holding us in a place where they're in charge, where they can continue to protect us, right? So we need to like integrate those things and actually engage in true growth, engage in like true assessment, seeing ourselves for real. And that might involve getting other people to help us do that. You know, that might involve actually being willing to accept feedback, even when we're in self-preservation or defensive mode, and recognizing that people aren't just telling us things to make us feel bad about ourselves, right? You know, or taking the accepting the catalyst that's showing up in front of us. If the same situations are recurring like a slightly different flavor of the same pie over and over and over again, then we also know we're not integrating. We also know that even though we're learning, we're engaging in just perceived growth. We're kind of fooling ourselves. There's no true growth there. So, if you could do one thing today, it might be looking at your life and maybe examining where you might be sitting in perceived growth. You might be sitting in a space of knowledge and believing that you've solved that you've addressed the stuff that's actually going on inside of you, but there's still a repeating pattern out there. You're still receiving the same feedback from people. And in those situations, the problem's probably not out there. The problem's probably in here.